Hello, Aaron Kubitz, personal trainer at Functional Aesthetics CC. We're helping average guys perform better in their lives inside and outside the gym. Today's video I'm going to be talking about an idea that popped in my head a couple weeks ago when I was watching another fitness influencer. This guy is actually a guy that I started watching way back in, 2010 or something like that. When I was first getting into the YouTube scene, watching YouTube videos and whatnot. You could probably count on less than two hands the amount of guys that were in the fitness space, at least that I could find, right? There wasn't a whole lot of them. Now, social media has just exploded. There's a lot of people that want to be online, getting their stuff out there. It's easier than ever to do that, but also because of that, it's also harder to gain exposure. But anyway, that's a story for a different day. So the idea that he was talking about was how, he's like, a lot of people give me credit for being way more disciplined than I actually am. He's like, I don't eat 100% clean all the time. He's like, I gotta have my sweets from time to time, and he's like, I actually find that, if I don't have a little bit of, a treat or something like that, I'll end up eating twice as much of the healthy food. And then not only do I feel like weighted down and sluggish and stuff, I actually, you're kind of like basically be counterproductive because you're eating more calories, which is kind of the point of when you're eating the healthier foods and stuff, or trying to reduce sugar in your diet, right? If you completely cut it out, then you don't feel satisfied, so you end up eating more calories, which, if your goal is to maintain a lean physique or something, is going to be counterproductive to that end. And when he said this, I could really relate to that. So years ago, I was struggling with some digestive issues. I had some candida overgrowth. So the doctor put me on this really strict diet. I had to eliminate a lot of the foods that I was used to eating, such as dairy. I had to no fruit, no grains whatsoever, even whole grains. And basically I could eat beans, vegetables, and meat, and sweet potatoes. That was it. And in the process of that, I ended up where I would eat a lot more food, or volume of food, because I didn't feel like I was satisfied. I felt like there was something missing. So even though I was stuffed, I was really full. Over time, I ended up just eating more and pushing past that because I felt like I was missing something. There was something else that I needed in my diet. And so I was kind of overcompensating in that way. So when you're thinking about, whether it's, your workouts or your diet, it's kind of like Ralph Waldo Emerson said. He said, every action is measured by the sentiment from which it proceeds, right? So if you're eating a food simply because you want it and it tastes good, then that's probably not a good reason to be eating that junk food, that cake, that ice cream, the cookie, right? But if you are eating it in order to stave off binging on it later on, or overeating calories in general, then it may be a good tool in the toolbox to help you achieve the final objective. Because it's the goal in the long run that is important, not necessarily how you get to that goal that is important. And while I was thinking about this, and in his video and stuff, and you might have noticed from the title of this video, and you're wondering, okay, well, where does this thing about winter driving come in, right? And it got me to thinking, being that I live here in Wisconsin, we have lots of snow and icy roads and things like that. And what happens, or what are you supposed to do when you start slipping on some ice, right? Do you if you frantically crank that wheel, or try to, regardless if it's on ice or anything like that, if you're losing control of a vehicle, if you try to wrench the steering wheel in the opposite direction or something like that, or even in the, they tell you to steer in the direction of the slide, right? And you want to make slight micro adjustments. You don't want to make these drastic adjustments, because what happens? It's like in the movies, right? You got the van, or what, the van going down the road, or you got the truck or something, and it's got that big old load on the back, and you crank that wheel, and what starts happening? Well, the whole the vehicle, starts swaying from side to side, and then maybe you start fishtailing back and forth, and before you know it, maybe you're able to, and if you realize the mistake, and you kind of make fine-tuned little adjustments and stuff, you can bring yourself back into a state of equilibrium, right? But if you don't, you risk fishtailing out of control and ending up off in a ditch on the side of the road, right? So the same thing is true with your diet. If you say, for example, eat too many calories one day, or you eat so say for example, you're eating a balanced diet, you're going into a cut, and typically what you do with a cut is that you want to reduce those calories, but you don't want to reduce from protein, right? And you don't really want to reduce from fat unless your fat is super high, over 30-40% of your diet, So what do? Well, you want to start first reducing those carbohydrates. So let's say, for example, you're reducing carbohydrates and you have a day where you go out with friends or something like that, and maybe you have a couple of drinks, or you're having some beer, or like not beer, but you're having pizza, or maybe you have a slice of cake, and then, well, that was pretty good, so let's have another one, and you totally botched the diet, right? And so you had way too many carbs. And so the next day you okay, I'm going to do a bunch of cardio at the gym, I'm going to eat no carbs today. And then what happens is that it's the same thing as trying to wrench that wheel super fast when you're driving down the road, right? Except it's your hormones. Your hormones get all out of whack. It throws everything out of equilibrium. Your blood sugar is going bonkers and stuff. Your hunger signals are all out of whack. And as a result, you end up, maybe you restrict it really low here, and then you go back into this cycle. So it's restrict, overeat, restrict, overeat. You're in this yo-yo phase, right? And that's absolutely not what you don't want to do as an effective approach to long-term results in your weight loss. All right, so what do you want to do instead? Okay, well, this is why I am a big fan of, when you decide, okay, I have some weight to lose, or I want to build some muscle, right? Either one of those scenarios, you're going to have to become disciplined about your diet. On the one end, you're going to have to figure out, well, how can I effectively sustain a calorie deficit so that my body has to start tapping into fat stores, right? On the other hand, you're like, how can I effectively sustain a slight calorie surplus, because I can't go on my hunger signals necessarily, because otherwise your body's pretty good at this. You're just going to if you're working out consistently, you have a good training program, and you just eat when you're hungry, you're going to pretty much maintain where you're at, right? So, and like in the beginning, if you haven't worked out at all, maybe you start working out, your hunger will increase, right? And to compensate for that, and so then you're going to gain some weight, right? But let's say you've been training consistently for a while, now you want to gain some weight, you've kind of flatlined in your body weight, you're going to have to consistently eat above and beyond what you want to eat so that you can continue to gain more muscle mass and get bigger, right? So in either one of these scenarios, you have to be disciplined. And this is why I always say in the beginning is to focus on little steps to get yourself from where you are. You have to first take stock of your inventory of where am I at currently in my eating habits, okay? And then you have to say, okay, here's my goal, and then what is the diet that I want to be eating in order to achieve that goal? And then you look at what is the discrepancy between where I'm currently and where I want to be, and then you make a plan on how to gradually bridge that gap from where you are currently to where you want to be. Because again, like in that driving scenario, right? If you go from where you are currently and there's a huge gap and a huge discrepancy, like for example, you're eating whatever you want, whenever you want, and it's primarily processed foods and sugar and stuff like that, and you're drinking, on the weekend with your friends, and then you say, okay, I'm going to go to strict, calorie counting, and I'm going to have this amount of protein, this amount of carbs, and this amount of fat in this particular ratio. It's going to be really hard to go cold turkey from doing that. And even for somebody who started out initially eating relatively healthy foods, even for me transitioning to doing that, it took a while. It took a few months to kind of transition myself to eating a certain amount of calories with a certain amount of macronutrient ratios and everything. So begin with first, if you're not already doing this, try to eat like at least, 1 meal per day of whole food. So let's say you're not eating any meals per day from a whole food source, right? Start out by eating 1 meal per day from a whole food source, okay? And then once that becomes pretty normal and you can manage that without too much added effort, because any changes you're making, it's going to require extra effort, right? Most of the things we do on a daily basis, they're just on autopilot. It's like getting a new job. It's a lot harder to start a new job than to go into a job you've had for years, because you have to rethink a lot of things. There's a learning curve. You have to learn the way that they do things. You have to learn the job itself, right? So the same thing with your diet, you know? Once you've adapted to that thing, and the thing is, you got to be consistent with this, right? Then take notice of that. Okay, can I now make another switch? And so then you add in another meal, and ultimately you want to get to a point where the majority of what you're eating is from whole food sources. And what I mean by whole food sources is things where they don't have to remove different parts of the plant or the animal or whatever, or you know, press it, you know, whatever it is. Like if, for example, if you're eating a let's say eating oatmeal as opposed to bread, right? Eating rice as opposed to bread. Rice is more basic, more whole, right? It's not, you know, broken up into a lot of different ingredients, right? Instead of apple juice, you're eating an apple. Instead of, you know, having like almond milk, you're eating some almonds, right? Instead of having peanut butter, just have a few peanuts or something. And the more basic you have it, the more closer to nature, the more filling and more satisfying it's going to be, and also the harder it's going to be to over-consume your calories. Okay, so now let's say that you've got that in place. The next thing, and oftentimes, if you do that, you're going to end up losing a bunch of weight right off the bat. Some people, they eliminate pop, or they stop drinking as much alcohol, or they only drink, you know, alcohol once a week. And that right there will cause them to drop 10, 20 pounds right off the get-go, just making that one small switch, you know. But let's say you want to get really lean, right? You want to get, you know, beach-ready fitness model looking physique or in something, right? And you want to get a little bit leaner. So then the next thing is you have to figure out, well, how many calories, right? And then you have to figure out the protein, right? And so the next, you want to focus on how many total calories do I need to hit my goal? And then within that, focus on the total amount of protein. And so I recommend getting 1 gram of protein per pound of lean body weight at a bare minimum. So you can go between 1 to 1.5, maybe even 2, because as you're cutting calories, you know, when you have plenty of carbohydrates and calories in general, carbohydrates stimulate insulin. Insulin is an anabolic hormone. You don't need quite as much protein when you have those carbohydrates elevated and you're getting plenty of calories. But when you go into a deficit, if you're not getting enough protein through your diet, your body's going to start robbing the protein from your muscles to fuel the, you know, other requirements that the other functions of protein in the body, such as hormone production, you know, repair of your organs, your skin, nails, hair, things like that. And it's going to start robbing it from the muscle. So you got to make sure you keep that protein up when you're in a dieting state. Okay, so once you have your protein and your total calories nailed down, then you want to figure out, okay, like what is the rest of it, so like fat and carbohydrates, right? So as long as total calories are in check and you don't have specific performance goals per se, then you want to figure out, okay, what ratio of fat to carbs do I feel the best doing? And this is why I'm a big fan of metabolic typing, right? So metabolic typing, not necessarily the exact macronutrient ratios that they give in that protocol, but rather than being a dieter, being a detective, learning to assess how does my body feel eating a certain way, and fine-tune yourself based upon the results of that. And I have a fat loss guide, actually, an ebook and stuff, which I've created to help guide you through some of the basics of fat loss and stuff. And I might include that in the link down below. If not, you can reach out to me in a message and I can send you that ebook. But so it's determining, okay, how much, you know, carbs and relative to how much fat, while maintaining my protein and my calorie goals, do I feel the best, right? And so I would say a good place to start is about 0.5 gram of fat per pound of body weight, and the rest of your calories coming from carbs. Now, you might be a person such as myself who I actually like being on a little bit higher fat content and maybe a little bit lower on the carb content, but that's just me personally. So you got to find out what works ideally for you yourself. All right, so to sum it all up, if you've heard of the story about the frog in the hot water, right? But the water didn't start hot, right? What happens? The frog's in the water in the pot, and then you gradually crank up the heat slowly over time. And pretty soon the frog just gets boiled to death, and he doesn't even realize it because the temperature was increasing over time slowly, and he just got more and more lethargic, and then all of a sudden he was just cooked and toast, right? Well, you can apply that same principle to your dieting, right? Gradually form balanced eating habits. Because once you have a good structure and you know what you're eating on a continual basis, then you can fine tune it and make adjustments from there, right? You can more easily adjust and to either go up or down in weight if you have a solid framework to begin with. You know, if you don't have that framework and know what you're eating on a daily basis, it's really hard to determine what you should do because everything is just haphazard. The same thing that goes in the gym, right? If you walk into the gym and you're lifting weights, and some guys, you know, they have good genetics or whatever, you know, or they're inadvertently doing the right thing, and so they get great results, right? But if they were to go and train somebody else or teach somebody else what they did, they couldn't do it because they don't know what they did to get where they got. They just kind of, it happened, right? Or if they give those same set of recommendations to another person, the other person maybe doesn't get the same results because they have a different body, they have a different set of genetics, they have different tendon insertions, muscle lengths, limb lengths, different hormonal levels, all these different things that are going to contribute to that, right? And so it's important to know what you're doing first so that you can then make more effective determinations of what you do in the future, whether or not it is actually effective. So like that frog in the water, fine-tune it slowly over time. And like Arnold Schwarzenegger said, he was like, okay, let's say you're starting off with a 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, you eat about 300 grams of carbohydrates a day, you know, and then you decide, okay, I want to get cut down and shredded for my competition. Well, then you want to reduce those carbohydrates down to maybe, you know, let's say 200, maybe 150 grams of carbohydrates, but not completely eliminate them. You want to make those gradual, slow turns. And why? Because when you got plenty of calories coming in and plenty of carbohydrates coming in, your metabolism is humming along at a really good pace, right? And if all of a sudden you just drastically cut calories, you're much more likely to also be losing muscle because you're going to be burning through the calories so fast that you overshoot and you start chewing into that muscle tissue as well. If you make a slower, more gradual approach, you'll be able to get super, super lean because you're gradually dialing it in over time. And as the metabolism is slowing down, okay, well now we ratchet it back a little bit further. Now we ratchet or take it up a notch further. We take it up a little bit more. We take it up a little bit more until you actually achieve that objective of where you're trying to do and just hone it in. It's like, you know, people always say, I give way too many examples, but I'm going to give you one more example here to belabor the point. If you have a log out in the woods and you want to make a table out of it, right? You don't go out there right away and start sanding the bark with a sandpaper to make that finished table, right? No, you got to take the chainsaw and chop off the bark, and then you got to take the planer and rough out all the edges. And then after that, now maybe you take some heavy grit sandpaper and you sand that down. And then over time, you just go finer and finer sandpaper and fine tune it in until you dialed into that super diced physique that you want, where you can look ripped like Sylvester Stallone in Rocky number 4, okay? I was just watching some of those movies, so that's top of mind. But you get the point. All right, guys, thanks for watching the video. Hope you guys got some good value out of my analogies here about driving on the road, frog in the boiling water, Rocky, making that table, you know, sand it down, dial it in, gradual adjustments over time, consistency wins in the long run, and all that good stuff. If you'd like to see more content related to workout design, either building muscle, losing fat, improving athletic performance, preventing injuries, or also working around those injuries if you do have them, so corrective exercise type stuff, rehabilitation, and yeah, that's it. All that good stuff. If you would like that kind of stuff, consider subscribing to the channel by hitting the button in the lower right-hand corner of the screen. And we'll see you all next time for more health and fitness-related information. Thanks, guys.